Well, happy Aloha Friday. Thanks so much for all of you already tuning in this morning, this Aloha Friday, March 19th. I'm Ryan Kalei-Suji, joined by Yanju Denise. And of course, this is Spotlight Hawaii on the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. And Yanju, this morning, we have a very special guest joining us here for the conversation.
Yes, we are so happy to welcome Honolulu Mayor Rick Blangiardi joining us live from his office at Honolulu Hale. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for joining us once again. It's been about a month or a little more. Yeah, there you go. Since you were last on, a lot has happened since then. Of course, you just delivered your State of the City address, unveiling your budget. Let's just talk about the basics. We're in Tier 3 now. How are we doing as a city?
Yeah, I think I could say for openness, first of all, I'm very pleased to be with you, and I feel like I could almost be on the show every day and be able to say a lot is happening. This, there's just a lot of momentum. The Tier 3 situation for us right now, to address that, is something I'm very pleased that we're able to move the community there. But let me just be clear. The community is in control. Community is in control through its behavior on what the metrics end up becoming. And so I was really pleased because of the community behaviors that we actually got there faster than we had anticipated. So that's a good thing. And then, as you said or alluded to, now we were to get some modifications to it as well. And those were all done in conjunction with the State Department of Health, who is the rulemaking organization. I'm sure we'll talk about it later today. I've stayed in my lane. One of the things I understood early on, right now, when I asked about what can the mayor do or not do, is one thing I can't do, irrespective of my own personal feelings or even aspirations, is override the State Department of Health. So everything has been done with their blessing and moving us forward, and I'm very pleased at where we are right now.
We know yesterday that there were a number of people from the wedding industry that gathered outside Honolulu Hale. You went out there to address them, to hear their concerns. Of course, weddings continue to not be allowed in the large masses, so to speak. They're still allowed to have a group of 10, but not to the degree in which many of these weddings would like to conduct their business and to have their opportunity to have these weddings take place. Where are you at right now with those decisions? I know that you said that you would go on and continue those conversations with the Department of Health and with the governor, but if you can update us on that conversation that you had yesterday with them and where you are in your decision-making with that industry.
Well, my heart went out to them because these are the wedding planners, people who make a business out of putting on weddings, not people who are protesting that they couldn't get married. And we recognize that that's a viable part of our economy and commerce, if you will, and part of our own economic recovery. And we've talked about this is getting businesses open. I talked about the state of the city. And it's true that businesses are open, but are they operating to full potential, et cetera? And as I listened to them yesterday, they've been shut down. And many of these folks, as they said, don't want to be performing these rogue events that we know are happening around the island in different places. They want to maintain the integrity of being an up and standing business. So I thought, we went at the modifications with the state, and weddings were right there at the top of the list, right, really, quite honestly, after sports. But the feeling there, as I said, it was reported that, the celebratory nature of weddings, with the kissing and hugging and dancing and all of that, there was just really concern about the intimacy of that, which was also in part getting our bars open. We had to agree to restaurant seating and not what we've typically witnessed in seeing bars. And in fact, this week, several bars were closed down by the Liquor Commission themselves, and their monitoring of not monitoring that. So what I heard yesterday was they're just asking for a little opening. And I'm prepared to go back to the State Department of Health and say, could we just have it at 25 people as a structured event? And we know the protocols, we'll adhere to those. And whatever. I think it's reasonable. We did get a lift on the moratorium on the funerals, and funerals in some ways are similar from the standpoint of people embracing each other, and at least historically, just extending one's condolences to the other is the antithesis, if you will, of a wedding. But there are similarities in human behavior. It's a reasonable argument. And then they presented me with the fact that, which I knew, that Maui, the state had approved weddings in Maui with gatherings of up to 100. I don't have a defense for that. So I think the state has been very reasonable in our arguments, and they've listened to us. This is one that I think is worthy of an appeal, if you will. We lost the first time. It wasn't just because of the demonstration. Be honest with you, I was wanting to wait a little bit because we want to see the impact, if you will, of the modifications, even though our sports haven't started yet, just to be sure the numbers stay safe, all the while we continue to vaccinate and we move forward. So, but I think given their legitimate argument, I'm at least willing to present it again. I can't guarantee it, but I think it's worthy of an appeal.
With that kind of an appeal process, what's the time frame for something like that? If you are, you would feel comfortable, it sounds like, with a threshold of 25 people. When could we actually see that kind of a change take place?
Well, since the newspaper, the Star-Advertiser, managed to put it on its front page today, I don't think either Dr. Char or Governor Riga is going to be surprised to hear from me later today, asking for a meeting early next week to talk about this. So I'm going to do that. We actually prepared some really good notes. Councilwoman Andrea Cipolla sent me a nice thing today on her thoughts on it. Wanted to champion it with a lot of other stuff because she had talked to that association. I mean, really, I think there's a legitimate argument there that can be made. Somebody sent to me some video that was on Facebook of a rogue wedding that took place out in Kahuku. It's reportedly 700 people. And I don't even know what to say to that. That's actually dangerous. And it took place last weekend. I looked at the video. I couldn't count all the people, but I didn't see a mask in the crowd. There were a lot of people there. There was everything that we said about dancing or whatever. So those things don't help make the case either. And I don't know how often that stuff is going on what comes to my office. Somebody just brought this in. But that's a little scary too, because again, so much of how we even got into tier 3 and what I said earlier about the community is in charge, really, when you think about it. It's not political, it's the community is what's driving the metrics. Part of the reason why we got to tier 3 is who we are as a people. And I've said repeatedly for months now, I've seen the effort. I've said places I've gone, I've seen people wearing masks, distancing, being really respectful, etc. So I don't want to jeopardize that. There is that situation where we could go backwards. We don't want to do that. And I don't even want to offer that as a threat. I'm just hoping every day that, as we get the daily reports here, that the numbers will stay down and confined and everybody says, okay, this is working, and we stay focused on tier 4. And actually, if I can say this, we're not that far from tier 4. Now, we have big cases, number today at 49. But if you look at the bottom metrics, which really are the drivers, which had to do with the low transmission rate of the disease. It's up until the last day or two. I think haven't looked at that analysis, but we have been there for weeks now with a low transmission rate and no pressure on the hospitals. In fact, at one point last week, we had 0 people in intensive care. Those are very healthy things. We were just looking at the top metrics for tier 4, which was under 20 and a positivity rate of under 1%. And we actually, over the last couple of days, had positivity rates under 1%. So I felt like we had great momentum moving forward. And I think that that's also part and parcel to what they listen to. And I want to make one other thing. When we met, I got to meet all the people that developed the tier system. There were a couple of suppositions in there that proved to be wrong, okay? One of them was that they really weren't sure that, we were going to get out of tier 1 when they constructed the tiers. And they admitted to me there was a certain amount of guesswork for tier 3 and tier 4. It was subjective at the time in a state of mind where they really couldn't predict the future. That's understandable. That was the argument we used on sports because it wasn't approved for tier 3. But the other one that was really, I think, gave us a compelling argument was that the supposition that if we had a vaccine was made, at the time that they wrote the tier systems, it probably would not be available until late summer or early fall 2021. And here we are in this very week, having just passed 500,000 vaccinations on our way to what we really think we need for herd mentality and herd immunity, about 1.5 million. So we need 1 million more. We're a third of the way there. So we're already in the first quarter, in the month of March, at over 500,000 people vaccinated. It's not actually people because we're getting dual shots. But we're making progress there, and that wasn't anything that was anticipated. So look, I want us to move forward, and I think you can embrace that too. But again, it goes back to what I've said now twice. I'll say it the third time. If we're able to get weddings approved, people are going to have to really regulate those and adhere to it. Now, the wedding planners say they'll do that. I want to believe them, just as I believe the people at the Restaurant Association and people at the Bar Association that they're going to adhere to that. And we can't be everywhere controlling people, but if we can get these concessions made, then people have to own it and do right by it for the rest of us. Okay, for the rest of us.
I want to just expand a little bit more on that. As we continue to see more tourists arrive on the islands, we saw a large influx over the weekend. Of course, it is spring break, so there is a large volume of visitors that are arriving. There are, those online and those who have commented on this program about the tourists gathering in Waikiki in large masses, unmasked. But on the same end, there were local residents gathering, as you said, weddings at the Sandbar in Kaneohe. There was a large party there last weekend. How do you respond to this balance with some saying that our numbers are holding, there aren't any hospitalizations, why not be allowed to return to some sense of normalcy? And the other end of the community who's voicing their opposition to these types of residents and visitors gathering without masks. How do you find that balance between these two conflicting community voices?
All right, and it's a great question, and it's hard to do that, right? Well, here we are making concessions. I more than understand the fatigue that everybody's had. We've all lived through this. I'm not void of that either. I mean, it's tiresome, to say the least. I think all we can possibly do to counter that is continue with the messaging and reminding people. This is not the kind of island-wide behavior, if you will, that I think we can enforce police-wise to any real effect, because it's just a preponderance of it if it's happening. We just have to keep appealing to people for the general safety of everybody. I understand the concerns of those people who are frightened and don't want to see this. And I think with respect to our tourists, I mean, there's stuff that we can do. We participated in putting signs all over Waikiki. I know there was police presence there asking people to wear masks, etc. We're trying to do this. We're in uncharted waters, so we continue to message, continue to remind people. I think when possible, we should break up any large gatherings if that in effect can happen. And we've made it really clear. And I think we're not going to have any problems with sports. I mean, I know parents are going to want to be on sidelines, but we told the coaches and the people getting permits. I'm counting on the players really to kind of monitor their own, the potential of that. It's about that. If people decide to go out, Ryan, and do stuff like that and just say, I don't care, I mean, they're just jeopardizing our current status and also, jeopardizing our public health. I'd like to believe that we're more responsible than that.
One of the things on here, there's some people commenting on the Quarantine Couple Breakers group. I know Angela Keene has met with you. She's leading that charge. One of the things that she's working on with Senator Dela Cruz is a measure that would essentially create a sort of enforcement task force of retired police officers and law enforcement that would then be able to be deputized and actually go out and do some of this mask enforcement and quarantine enforcement to kind of supplement HPD. Is that something that you think is a good idea?
I think anything and everything is a good idea if it's done in the proper way. What you want to avoid is these people getting beaten up by some crowd who doesn't want to be reminded that they should behave themselves. I worry about stuff like that happening if it were to get hostile, but if it could be done on a friendly basis and people are just trying to encourage each other, we're just hit the 1 year mark, I guess, on this pandemic. You look at the 1918 pandemic, which was the last one we had when the world was a very different place, had only 1.5 billion people on the planet then. Now I think we're pushing somewhere getting towards 8 billion. But in 1918, a third of the world, 500,000 people, 500 million people got sick in 1918. They weren't able to develop vaccines. The masks were, over 50 million people died from that last pandemic, which was an influenza virus. They're not even really quite sure what the doctoring, where the medical community was in those years and what the actual thing was. And it took 2 years to get out of it. We're in a very different place now with as many people on the planet. We're all hearing about what's happening in Europe, elsewhere, variants and whatever. We're not anywhere near being safe. And I think that while we try to, and this has been the hard part, we try to move people forward in this tier system, which I agreed to stay in because it made sound sense, and we've evolved very quickly, in just my short time as mayor, including with the modifications, and then have people spoil a good thing. We're asking for restraint. And people need to understand that. Look, and with the advent of the tourists coming in, our Safe Travels program has been working and will continue to work. We want to hope that that holds up as well. People getting here or showing up and getting on planes unless they can prove they have negative test results. We want to get on with that, but we also need people to cooperate. This is not like, if you don't, we're going to come get you kind of thing. So if we have a group like that who can do it in a really proper way to encourage people, you know, to do that, to behave. I'm all for anything and everything we can do. That's why I said it's another form of messaging. So I think we're at an unprecedented level right now of supporting each other and trying to help each other get through this, because this has been very dangerous. We have really benefited here against the disease and remaining, as I said the other day in my State of the City, best numbers in the country. And I don't want to see that spoiled. A city of our size, nobody has numbers like we're doing. So our reality is very different than we have here. But we need people to protect that. We really do. Everybody has to own that. The vaccine is not a miracle drug. We're not even sure yet, you know, of its viability from the standpoint of, you know, absolute protection. We're not even near where we need to be as far as getting 900,000 people vaccinated. And just so you know, just if I can take the opportunity, because I don't want to play doctor here, and I'm not, but just 1.5 million, they're saying 1.2 million in vaccinations with the Moderna and Pfizer gets us to 600,000 people. And I just learned yesterday that a lot of people are showing up. I met with our medical team last night for their second shots, which is good. We've got a couple of things going for us that are different than the mainland. That's why I keep going back to our group behavior. One, high incidence of second shots, which is good compared to elsewhere. We see that people are not going back. And then also people willing to be vaccinated is a much higher percentage of what they're dealing with elsewhere. But 1.2 million, 600,000, and then they're anticipating that maybe by June we will have gotten 300,000 Johnson & Johnson, and that's going to be applied against certain populations that the feasibility of giving them only one shot versus second shot is there. And so that's how we look to get to 900,000 people, 1.5 million, and that's why we're a third towards that. But just again, on the vaccinations, we're a third of the way.
You know, we want to move on to another topic, obviously, that is making headlines, and that is rail. There is a number of headlines coming because of the ballooning price tag of rail. Now we're getting word that there could be some defects in the tracks that will require even a further delay and even more cost. What is your thoughts right now at where the project is at, and your level of, you know, just how confident are you in Lori Kahikina and the team that's leading that, and where we are right now with this project?
Yeah, look, Ryan, we are on this, if not daily, weekly. We're meeting again later on today. And so let me just tell you, you know, I just learned this past week about the defects and the problems and the issues and what that might mean. It was a week ago at our weekly meeting. It's the first time I heard that. And then also I did a State of the City earlier this week, operating on a $3 billion revenue shortfall, which was a projected figure, only to learn yesterday, you know, the $3.55 billion, you know, $500 million more. When I said earlier, everything is up in the air, everything is up in the air right now. But what I do know is that we're not going to simply walk away from this project. We're not going to shut it down. I'm not going to come out with any arbitrary announcements as to where it may end. We're not going to end at Middle Street. We're determined to get behind it. We've had now a couple of conversations with the FTA. I'm encouraged with their attitude towards us, but we're trying to get things under control. And one of the first things we've done is gone in and we've let people go. And I'm not going to talk about personnel matters, but we've done that. We've canceled contracts. We've eliminated redundancies and inefficiencies. We're looking at the prospects of some of the re-engineering to get down the Dillingham corridor. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm the fourth mayor out of, you know, that's touched this plan. So we walked into it, even in my campaign a year ago before COVID, I talked about, you know, better fiscal responsibility and transparency. So we want to be that way. But, you know, when you learn about stuff and these big swings, you know, almost simultaneous with when you're learning about it, $500 million more, $3 billion, you know, shortfall or defects in those things. I mean, you know, it's a very fluid situation. But I do think we have to continue to press and push forward and see what problems we can solve and where we can go. But I don't have any notion right now of shutting this down or putting a stake in the ground and say, we'll build it to here. We're going to see and try to do as best we can by it without burdening the public, okay? And that's where we are right now.
You know, on this program, Lori Kahikina, a little while back, told us that by the end of this year, she would be turning over the project to the city up until Aloha Stadium, and basically giving it up to you to decide whether or not to open the train and at least get it running to there. I know that that's not really especially with the redevelopment in that area, it's kind of a destination to nowhere, but it is a destination of somewhat. And since these trains are just sitting there, what is your view? Would you like that to at least open once you have that turned over to you, or do you think it should go further in the city before you actually start service?
Yeah. So let me ask you, okay? Would you be interested in riding the train to Aloha Stadium? I mean, would that have any interest to you? Let's just project. I know you don't. I don't think you live out in East Kapolei, but. Right?
I mean, I think there is an argument to be made that some service is better than no service, but I know that there is cost associated with that. That said, these are somewhat sunk costs, that these trains are sitting there, and, you know, do we want to get it up and running? Do we want to get people, you know, she talked about just getting people comfortable with the project, getting people to experience it, to touch it, to feel it, and perhaps then change attitude toward it. So, I mean, I'd like to ride it at least once. I don't know if that's worth opening it just for that, but I wonder if you feel that there is utility to opening it, even if it is just going that far.
Okay, so I think the jury's out. I've looked at some analysis and stuff on this, and you know, there's some expectations and projections. We could, even on that limited ridership level, have 12,000 people a day riding. You know, for just in the Waipahu corridor there, and that's a possibility. But that statement that Lori made was before we learned about the defects. And I want much more of an investigation about the defects on doing that before we consider it. Plus that, we need to look at a lot of the stuff in the contracts and where we are right now as to whether or not that's feasible. And I'm not so sure that the cash box would do it. The last thing I want to do on a project right now that's some 15 years in the making, that's billions of dollars over budget, projections right now as recent as this week, making it further away. Projections of now a timeline to finish it in 2031. You know, at best, 10 years from now to completion to Ala Moana. We're now having reported that there are some real concerns about the safety, if you will, of it, which is, again, in this day and age, we're talking about public safety in every conversation we have as a result of this pandemic. You know, I want to really look at that. So I'm not going to just simply arbitrarily say, as soon as it's ready to operate, we'll start operating it. That's still up in the air, and we're going to have to make a lot of determinations based on things that we're learning now, okay? So I come back to you and I say, it's just a matter of common sense. Where all of the feelings, the people who are anti about rail, to open it up somewhere where we can't establish ridership and we're simply doing it, is going to be even one more blight on a project that we're still 10 years away from completing. I want to be very careful about where we time that and what we do and the safety of it all. And right now, today, in all honesty, and as candid as I can be, I don't know if that's possible.
You know, we could spend an entire show talking about rail, but we want to move on. We thank you for expressing your views on that. Another big topic, of course, is homelessness. You spoke about it in your State of the City address in redefining the way in which the city will combat homelessness in our community. If you can give us some of the highlights of that and how you think the city will realistically begin targeting this problem that seemingly has every mayor that has sat in your in the chair that you sit in now has had to deal with.
Well, you know, precisely that, Ryan. We decided to, based on every mayor who sat in this chair, but knowing full well that homelessness is a national problem that plagues every major city, especially in the coastal cities, but it's actually true now throughout all of the mainland America. I don't think there are a lot of cities that don't have a homeless issue. It's become more pronounced in bigger major urban areas. We've seen it in places like Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, et cetera, and on the East Coast as well. Look, this is not a small problem. It's a complicated problem. One of the things that we're doing fundamentally, it starts with leadership and a vision. And I'm so grateful that Anton Krupke, who's a very accomplished man who has had an incredible career, has agreed to take on this assignment to bring his business acumen, his heart, if you will, even to the job on problem solving. So we start with the vision of shifting away from having police be the first responders into having social services, and that's going to be medical and other kind of social workers, in which we're working in collaboration right now to be able to do that as first point of contact. That's a really important thing, because we want to be able to treat these people with dignity. We understand our chronic homeless, many of whom are, in drug addicted, mental illness, etc. But as I said throughout the campaign, being poor is not a crime. Losing it, being homeless is not a crime, certainly. Or for that matter, even people who are mentally ill out on the street. These are not criminal activities. We don't have jails to take them to. There's no place. You can't even pick them up and drive them down somewhere. The police will tell you that's considered kidnapping. We know the compassionate disruption wasn't working. Every homeless service provider I worked with over the years, and I got to know many of them well, and our own diligence with the Star-Advertiser, everything we tried to do to educate the public, to empower our political figures, whatever was being practiced by my predecessors or anybody else really wasn't working. There is a way to do this. It's going to require something different, and that's what we're teeing up. We're now collaborating in ways with the state that we've never done before to coordinate. And so I'm really pleased that Eddie's doing Anton's doing that with Eddie Mercero and Scott Morishige. We're also reaching out to places, people like in the Hawaii Community Foundation. We've met, Mike Formby and myself have met on behalf of Anton. He's also met with them, with Hawaii Community Foundation, with Terry George at the Castle Foundation, with Corbett Columba at Weinberg. Next week, we've got a whole program we're kicking off with Kamehameha Schools, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and with the Office of Department of Hawaiian Homelands to enlist them. I know Anton's going to be out today looking at a project at Barbers Point. We're going to do some really innovative things, involve a lot of collaboration. We have some monies, we think, from the American Rescue Act we can apply. We think by next year's budget we'll have even more. Well, we're trying to set it up. In the meantime, we're not practicing compassionate disruption, but we are doing cleanups, and we're doing those for sanitation purposes, for health, and for security in some of the places. So we still have that practice right now because we need to be able to do that, but not with the notion we're just going to move them around somewhere, knowing that they're going to come back. We're trying to maintain people's feeling of well-being and not letting some of these things get out of control to the best of our ability. But we believe that if we can, and this has been the hallmark of successful programs elsewhere. And look, there have been, despite what I said earlier about homelessness is plaguing major U.S. cities in ways that none of us could have imagined, all exacerbated by this pandemic, there has also been successful programs. And I happen to believe, here I am as mayor of the city and county of Honolulu, not having been born here, but having lived here for most of my life with incredible respect for our culture, that we as a people here could be a role model, could be a model example here when it comes to treating people with dignity. And so we're going to also enlist the churches. Anton's involved. We've had an offer from now, a coalition of 650 churches, perhaps one each, to adopt a family or an individual. That's something we've never had before. We're going to try to coordinate the efforts. One of the things that we identified quickly was how disparate the efforts were. Well-intended people all over the place, not having really a specific game plan. So this takes a while to set up. I could talk more about it. I think we're going to do it with the sense of decency and humanity, at the same time discipline, and we're going to apply resources against it. We haven't begun to talk about the potential of what we own in city property, with buildings and whatever else we can possibly do. I was involved extensively on the H4 project. We're not quite there right now, but we're almost there. And what I know that can do with people who are really the chronic homeless. We were just out last week at the San Island Treatment Center. They've done some miraculous work out there. I've talked about Habilitat. There are things we can do and things we will do, and it's also going to create jobs. We may not eliminate it, but we're going to take a very, very big bite out of it. And I believe, and I've said this all along, it's a scalable problem, but it's also something that we face. You have to come to realization that our demographics have shifted on this island. 50% of the people living paycheck to paycheck is a very precarious situation. And so we want to be respectful of that. Not everybody is the person that is out of their mind, roaming aimlessly as a threat, walking down the street, in Chinatown, which we're really committed to cleaning up. So you're right, Ryan. A lot of people have been in this role, And other efforts have been made. I'm not suggesting none of them did, but they didn't work. We're trying to find something that will work, and we think we're on the right track.
Okay, well, it's the top of the hour, so we know we have to let you go. We just want to give you an opportunity to address the audience with a final message. You're always welcome on this program, and we love having you on. So thank you for being here today. And what's your final message to the folks watching this morning?
This was the fastest half hour I spent all day. My final message is that, look, we know we came into office where people were feeling very fearful and uncertain. Our goal right now as a team, with the incredible, accomplished group of men and women we have here, is a step to build some hope through our actions and the things that we do. And ultimately, someday, God willing, when I'm finished with this office, leave people who are confident. So if we can go on that journey together, from fear and uncertainty to hope to confidence, that's what we're about as a team.
All right, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for spending your Friday morning with us. And as Yandri said, you're always welcome back on this program. We appreciate you taking our questions this morning. Aloha.
I can't wait for you to have Anton on in a couple of weeks. You will love it.
We are looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Mayor Rick Blangiardi joining us this morning from his office live at Honolulu Hale. Very interesting, Ryan, to hear his thoughts about weddings, basically saying that he's going to be having a meeting probably early next week with the governor and Dr. Char about perhaps allowing up to 25 people in a controlled way to reignite that part of the economy. And also his thoughts on rail. So we covered a lot of ground today.
That's right. And we're actually going to be speaking with Dr. Char and the governor next week. So we will get an update from them on these conversations that's happening. As the mayor said, he acknowledges the fact that he understands what Maui County allows with their wedding situation. And so we are hoping to get some answers from the Department of Health and the governor and the administration on why maybe Maui can allow these weddings of 100 people and why Oahu has not been given the green light in this case as well. So we look forward to that conversation that we will be having next week with both of them.
Yeah, and I really interested, going back to rail, just to the idea Lori Kahikina laid out here that she would be essentially turning over the keys at the end of the year. And the mayor, they're saying that he does not sound right now at this point that he is prepared to open that part of the rail. It's sort of a destination to nowhere, some would say. And also now these new revelations that there could be some safety issues with the line itself. Just so much there to cover.
Yeah, and we'll just have to continue to wait to see what that update looks like as they move on with this project. But the mayor being very adamant and firm in saying that we are not stopping this. We are committed to seeing this project through. Yes, there is challenges with the budget, but there is that's something that they are going to work hard to work through and make sure that they see that this project does get completed in the fashion that it was intended to do, going all the way as best they can to Ala Moana Center. So a topic I'm sure we'll be discussing for many, many years to come.
Yeah, years to come. You're right. Something else that's very interesting that the mayor has put a priority toward that we didn't cover today is the Office of Climate Change. We are going to be talking about climate change, talking to the head of the city's department on climate change and on sustainability, along with Caroline Carl, who helps to run Hawaii Energy. We'll be discussing that on Monday. So please make sure you tune in then. Governor David Ige joins us on Wednesday. And then Peter Ingram, the CEO of Hawaiian Airlines, will join us on Friday. Hawaiian Airlines has opened up a variety of new routes to destinations in California, Florida, and Texas. We're going to be talking about the health and viability of that airline. And, we're seeing more and more tourists coming. So where are they coming from? What are those flights looking like? We're going to be talking about that on Friday.
Yeah, looking forward to all those conversations again. Thank you for tuning in and for being a part of this conversation. We'll see you right back here on Monday at 10:30. Until then, stay safe, have a great weekend, and aloha.
Aloha.